Good morning.
Good morning, good morning.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in time. It's something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs and still frames in your mind. Hang it on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos of memories and dead skin on trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end it's right. I hope you had the time of your life.
Travis, I don't think this microphone is working. All right. How are you guys this morning? All right. You want to change the word a little bit? Let's go. 1, 2, 3, and... If I can reach the stars, pull one down for you, shine it on my heart, so you can see the truth. Then alive inside is everything it seems. For now I find it's only in my dreams that I can change the world. I will be the sunlight in your universe. You will think my love was really something good. Maybe if I could change the world. I could be a king, even for a day. I'll take you as my queen and have no other way. And our love will rule in this king we made. Then now I'm through, reaching for the day that I can change the world. I will be the sunlight in your universe. You will think my love was really something good, baby, if I could change the world. James Harper, guys. That I can change the world. I will be the sunlight in your universe. You will think my love was really something good, baby, if I could change the world, baby, if I could change the world, baby, if I could change the world. Thank you. I want to welcome to the Bema Dr. Reverend Keith Cox.
Hello. Hello, everyone. You're Ron Spiewak, James Harper, and Joey Leppitz here. Happy to have everyone here on a fresh, bright, sunny fall morning, right? It's a fresh, bright, sunny fall morning, right? Good. I thought it was. Happy to have you affirm it. Standing in here today ready to change the world. You guys ready to change the world?
Anytime.
We're going to look at that today by looking at how we change ourselves. Dun, 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 dun. Change ourselves and ultimately changing the world. So good morning, everyone. I'm Reverend Dr. Keith Cox, and my title is the spiritual leader here at the Center for Spiritual Living Los Angeles. We're a metaphysical-based community that comes together on Sunday mornings to celebrate our ability to change our life, in essence. And so, was that an affirmation? That was an affirmation that, yes, you too can change your life. But metaphysical-based community means that we ascribe to the beliefs that we have the ability to change our lives by changing our thinking, and that we live in a universe that is governed by spiritual law, and that spiritual law brings into the field of experience, in other words, our lives, a reflection of what's going on in our mind, our heart, our soul, and our being. And so the whole concept of this philosophy is becoming aware that you are one with the only power that exists. We call it God. You can call it whatever you want. It matters not what you call it. But we're really clear that it matters that you call it, and call it often, and call it through your thoughts and your actions, your beliefs, and your interactions and your reactions with life itself, and align yourself with its qualities. Its qualities are peace, power, beauty, joy, light, life, love, and wisdom. And in so doing, that law of life that governs life brings into our experiences that reflect our owning our oneness. So that's what we come together every Sunday morning and in class to remind ourselves that we're here on earth to do. So other things that we're here to do this morning is to say hello to each other. So take a moment and say hello to each other, and take a moment to turn off any electronic devices that you have that may make noise, i.e. a telephone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So we're also saying hello to those that are watching us on Facebook Live. Hello, Facebook Livers, and those joining us on live stream, whether it's live or you're doing that at a later date when it's been put into one of those private storage devices for access later. So thought you would like that. So today, you'll notice me continuing to play with this. It's a new microphone, so I'm trying to get used to the, stay seated. Just try, thank you, but stay calm. Just getting used to its, the way it's connected to my body. All right, so change is what I'm talking about today, and it's going to be the theme of our service today. And I preemptively share that with you right now because as we move into our opening ritual this morning, I have invited the musicians to change up the music. Now, they're not changing the song, they're just changing the style of the song a little bit this morning. And so I invite you to change your mind to be open to that, okay, right now. It's going to have a little bit more of a modern twist to it, but the ritual itself is still the same. And so this is an opportunity for us to open our mind and to go within and anchor ourselves into the oneness of life and look at one of the qualities of the divine that exists within us in a new way. So I'd like to invite up to the Bema David Bowman, one of our members here and students, to be our illuminator, a wordsmith of life. And so you'll have an opportunity to sing along a little bit, so open up your modern singing and do that, and then I'll close with a spiritual mind treatment. Gentlemen, take it away.
Please join us. Calling in the light, calling in the light, calling in the light of love, calling in the light, calling in the
So we perform the ceremony, right? Oh, you're going to go one more? All right, here we go. Sorry, change.
Calling in the light, calling in the light, calling in the light of love, calling in the
So in appreciation of James giving us a little beatbox this morning, we perform this ceremony to promote the universal consciousness of life, which acknowledges that all peoples and all faiths, all sentient beings come from the one great universal presence we call spirit. And the purpose of this ritual is to draw into our gathering a conscious awareness, an expanded conscious awareness of our oneness and the qualities that we each possess. And so as we continue to feel the vibrations shift during this experience, and become ever more aware of the light of life that exists in and as all expressions of life, we remember that that includes you and it includes me. And so we look at the quality of the divine that we each possess today, which is power. The acronym for the word power that we use during this ritual is this: presenting our wholeness enhances our reality. P-O-W-E-R. And so as David lights the first candle for the letter P, which stands for the word presenting, in this context, presenting is the action of consciously sharing the presence. In the book, The Science of Mind, this is defined as follows: to meditate upon the presence of God is to indraw the universe into one's own soul. Moving to the second candle for the letter O, the word our in this acronym Being one with all of life, Dr. Holmes addresses this in the quote, "The one spirit has placed the stamp of individuality upon itself and called it you." Moving to the third candle, the W, as David lights it, he does so for the word wholeness. In spiritual terms, we're speaking of the whole, and we are speaking of the divine, which is also known as source, or God, or the thing itself. Moving to the fourth letter, E, we light this candle for the word enhances. Synonyms for the word enhance are intensify, increase, and improves the quality of. So let's know together the conscious engagement of our thought regarding our wholeness is intensified during this ritual and beyond, and it continues to be increased, and all on this planet be benefit from this action. Moving to the fifth letter, R, we light it for the word reality. In spiritual terms, reality means that which is indestructible, that which is incapable of decay. It is unchanging and everlasting, presenting our wholeness enhances reality. Moving to the sixth and final candle, the healing candle. I ask you to take a moment and to think of anyone that you would like to silently put into the light of the healing flame so that they may experience the eternal and everlasting love of the divine. And I ask you to consciously put into the light all elected officials and politicians in our country so that they may not only feel the healing light, but use their light as they engage in their jobs.
Please repeat after me. I am love.
I am love.
I am peace.
I am peace.
In my heart.
In my heart.
I am free.
I am free.
Nice. I am spirit.
I am spirit.
I am soul.
I am soul.
All together.
All together.
We are whole.
We are whole.
Calling in the light. Calling in the light. Calling in the light of love. Calling in the light. Calling in the light. Calling in the light.
Instrumental with this beatbox going, okay?
Calling in the light of love. And so it is, and so it is, and so it is.
So keep going. No vocals, just instrumental and beatbox, okay? So today is the day that we open our mind, our heart, our soul, our being to a greater expression and expansion of the light of life. We embrace change. And we do so founded in knowing that we are one with the very power that is changeless. And so these times, as they are a-changing, this brings us joy and excitement and a new perspective of life. Choosing to live in faith, not fear. Choosing to live in love, not hatred. Choosing to live in a state of inquiry, not a bad attitude. because we know that life indeed is intrinsically good and we are good in it. And so we use the goodness that is our nature to propagate more of itself, reflecting the nature of the power that gives light to the light itself. And so we move forward today, opening our mind, opening our heart, open our being with a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to grow. Here we grow again. As we say together, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, David. Thank you. So I love the way the impromptu nature of spirit shows up. I've always wanted to do some beatboxing here. We've never had it happen. And James Harper showed up beatboxing this morning. So I don't know about you all, but I personally think that's quite a talent. But one that can replicate this box through their vocal cords. So where are you guys going? Oh, you're going to the piano. Yeah, so all right. So speaking of change, we're changing our style of music right now. So happy to have James Harper back in the house. So very much so. A beautiful musician, a great balladeer, and a talented man. So without further ado, as he's communicating with Travis, I give you James Harper.
Come gather round, people, wherever you roam. Admit the waters around you have grown. Accept that it's soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time is too you worth saving, then you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone. For the times they are a-changing. Come writers and critics, prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin. There's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are changing. Come, senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who is stalled. It'll soon, there's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are changing. Come, mothers and fathers throughout the land, don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Just get out of the new one if you can't lend a hand, for the times they are changing. The line it is drawn and the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be last. The present now will later be past, 'cause the order is rapidly fading. And the first one now will later be last, for the times they are a-changing. Yeah, the times they are a-changing.
James Harper. Thank you. Beautiful. I requested that song. I did, and I love that song. Absolutely love it, and just some great versions of it, which I think you should record that, by the way, James. You should record that version of that. There's another version by Kebmo that's pretty amazing, if you guys know Kebmo. Just really spectacular. But the original was written by Bob Dylan in 1963, and I'm going to read the lyrics to you so you hear them anew. Come gather round, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown. And accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, and you better start swimming, or you'll sink like a stone, for the times, they are a-changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the will's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he that get hurts will be he who has stalled. The battle outside raging will soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you don't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend your hand, for the times they are a-changing. The line it is drawn, the curse it is cast. The slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order is rapidly fading, and the first one now will later be last, for the times they are a-changing. Now I chose that song and these lyrics, and the theme today, these times are a-changing, prior to knowing what would unfold politically in our world this past week, right? But I think Spirit speaks to us oftentimes to let us know what we are ready to embrace ourselves in from a mental perspective. When I looked at the theme for today, change, these times are changing, it wasn't necessarily for that. It was just understanding that change is always happening. That change is always happening, right? Right? For all of us, because that's the nature of life, for it to always be happening. And the times are a-changing once we come to realize that, of course, they're changing because we live in a universe, as I stated earlier, that is governed by spiritual law. And as consciousness, both for the totality of consciousness, for the collective of consciousness, for the individual consciousness, as it grows and expands and reacts and interacts with the things that show up in life, then the law of life responds to that consciousness, thus bringing out an experience that is different than the one before, because the times are always changing as a reflection of the state of mind that is always changing. One of the things that I absolutely love about these lyrics is that they can be interpreted as a metaphysical or new thought call to action. If we were to get out of our own judgment of when it tells us that if we're too old to walk this path, then get the hell out of the new one, not get caught up in the languaging around that, but listen to what he's telling us to do. He's saying, raise your mental awareness to what's going on, realize that things are unfolding in front of us, much of which the seeds have been planted, the die has been cut way prior to our experiencing of the times as they're changing, but we're being called to action to be awake, alert, and present as to how we bring ourselves to the events that have unfolded. That's the change. And that's taking place for all of us, whether it's a political scenario, whether it's a personal health scenario, whether it's life in general, whether it's the loss of a loved one, no matter what it may be, that life is always changing, thus the times are always changing. But as awakened metaphysicians, those who have chosen to be awakened to the nature of life, those that are awakened to knowing that we are imbued with wisdom and intelligence and power, that we know already prior to the changing times showing up that they are changing, and we have the capacity and the ability and the wherewithal to lean into them and show up as beings that are personally self-empowered, who have been awakened spiritually, and to do that not from a place of ego, but from a place of knowing that as we are founded in our nature of spiritual beings, that we're called to express one of the qualities that exist within us, which is love. And so we get to show up in all of these scenarios in life, which sometimes appear to be challenging, sometimes seem to be fabulous, but get to show up as peace, power, beauty, joy, light, life, love, and wisdom. And if you and I both lean into a greater understanding day by day, by day, by day, thought by thought, by thought, by thought, and so it goes, aligning with those qualities, that when stuff shows up, as Marianne Williamson says, then we have strengthened our spiritual musculature and we're ready to embrace the things that show up. Well, now, is that easy to do? And how do we handle it? Well, I think that the only way that we can do that is to meet and greet our understanding of change in the very moment. And to understand, as John F. Kennedy tells us, that change is the law of life. And to those who look only to the past or present are certain to miss the future. In other words, he's telling us that it's important for us to stay awake to what's going on in the very moment, to not get caught up into what was, right? But to stay present to what's going on by knowing that forever there is a cycle of creation being made manifest through us. George Bernard Shaw tells us that progress is impossible without change. And those who cannot change their minds cannot change anything. Now, one of the reasons that I loved letting the Jets play with Calling in the Light today was because it gives us the opportunity to shake up how we react to the change itself. To look at that as a saying is like, ooh, do I like that? Do I not like it? What's going on? But it is an example to us that change is always transpiring. And we can look at the change of life when it shows up, and I don't mean that as the change of life, I mean the change of life as it's showing up, and even the change of life, and be able to view it from a perspective of wholeness, of oneness, of the unfolding of life itself without getting emotionally attached to whether we like it or not. Does that make sense? Then, so how do we do that? Well, we do that by choosing to embrace what it is that we can change as opposed to trying to change the things that we can't. As students of the science of mind, we have ascribed and subscribed to being mental healers. We have ascribed to being agents of change on this planet. Our vision statement is that we support individuals finding their personal self-empowerment through a spiritual awakening. And so that spiritual awakening, once we've done our work in that, reminds us, if you will, that no matter what situation, no matter what scenario, no matter what life experience or event shows up, we are at choice on how we respond and react to those very things that show up. Wayne Dyer tells us, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. That's a modern day approach to what we've heard before of change your thinking, change your life. What he's telling us here is that when we choose a different viewpoint, then what we see is different. It's the same as if you're looking through the camera of an iPhone 6 or 8 or 11. I thought you guys would get that and understand that, right? The 6 has an old camera, the 8 has the newer one, and the 11 has the 3 cameras. Okay, all right, so I'm going to choose to look at your response differently. I'm going to choose to look at those things differently. So now what I'm looking at is different, all right? So, Bob Dylan tells us that there's nothing so stable in life as change. Take that in. There's nothing more stable in life as change. Stephen Hawkins tells us, I've noticed that even people who claim everything in life is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it, still look before they cross the road. Thank you. Thank you, Stephen Hawkins. So I'm going to say that again for those of you that didn't get it. He says, I've noticed even people who claim everything is predestined and that we can do nothing to change it look before they cross the road. It's funnier the second time, isn't it? Why? Now I get it, Jim says. Why is that? That is because we have within us a natural system to not only navigate change, but to use our power, our divine nature in a way so that it is effective. In other words, we have within us this infinite wisdom that says, and intuition, don't step out into oncoming traffic because car wins. Right? That's one of the qualities of the divine. We have wisdom within us. We have intelligence within us. We also know why the car wins. Because more weight crushes smaller weight, right? That's a law of life, right? And that when that bigger weight crushes the smaller weight, you're going to become even smaller, okay? So the question is, how do we show up in life? And what are we thinking when we get to that crossroads, both literally and metaphorically? Well, from the great book, Self-Talk Ninja, we're told that you're constantly evolving and developing in the direction of your dominant thoughts. In other words, it's what we really focus on when we navigate our life that we then get to see in form. But it's also important for us to know it's not enough to both have the information of this teaching, to know that our dominant thoughts have power, but to then apply them. Knowing is not enough, Bruce Lee tells us. We must apply what we know. Willing is not enough in life. We must do. What we're being told there, as many of you know, one of my favorite Ernest Holmes quotes is, information without application is hallucination. What we're being told is that every single day, we're being called as awakened beings to fine-tune our mind, to look at life through a new lens, to see it from a new perspective, and at the same time to use this information, to use this teaching, to use the law of life, the ability to evolve our consciousness more and more and more so that we indeed have the strength and musculature so that when life is a-changing or the times are changing and it throws us a curveball, we have the ability to use our strength to carry us to the next step. So what we're talking about here today is that let you and I, let today be the day that we consciously engage in these changing times from a new perspective today. And to do it as spiritual mind healers. Ernest Holmes tells us that healing is revealing. What he's telling us is as we step into healing, revealing our acceptance of who we are as spiritual beings and having faith that the law of life is doing its part, that ultimately the outcome will reflect that work that we do. He writes it in this way: spiritual mind practice is the very essence of faith. It is the essence of conviction, an act of assurance, a complete surrender of the will to a willingness to believe. Now that's a really big statement because so often in our teaching we go from understanding the surrender of the will, in other words, realizing it's not ours to fix or to make or to create. But we think that so often we go from, okay, I can let go of that belief, but does that mean I automatically have to have the new one? And that's a big charge and a big call in life to go from fear to faith. What he's telling us here is that let's choose to let go of the fear and then have the willingness to have the faith. Have the willingness to have the faith. And to be open to the willingness. And it's from that place of willingness that the faith that exists within us as a consciousness that exists as the consciousness of the divine, as Ernest Holmes tells us, we're not to have a faith in God, have the faith of God, continuing to affirm that for ourselves, then it will rise up through us and make itself known through us, which is the only way it can do its thing. Now, what that requires for us is to stay open to the willingness for it to happen. And the minute the fear or the doubt or whatever shows up, to push it aside and stay in a state of receptivity. He goes on to tell us that a complete abandonment of thought to the invisible is what is being called for here. But the practitioner adds law to his faith and spiritual principles. In other words, once we move into that state of willingness, it's also important for us to have faith, the faith of God. In other words, an unquestionable faith that the power itself is unfailing by nature, because it is, and then use the spiritual principles or spiritual laws of life into our spiritual practice. He goes on to tell us that that particular individual, you and me, adds a conscious use of the law of mind to their conviction of the presence of spirit. In doing this, they bring the personal to bear on the impersonal, which is principle. Now, I love that piece because he tells us that as we step into this journey that I'm speaking of, we bring ourselves, the personal, to bear on the impersonal. In other words, we bring the totality of who we are as individualized expressions of the very thing itself and lay it upon the altar of the thing which is impersonal. We give over our uniqueness to that which is impersonal and say to it, you use me, instead of, I'm going to use you. And if you don't show up the way that I want you to, then I'm going to get pissed off and walk away. It's saying, no, strengthen your faith muscles and hand it over to the very thing itself. Now, what's important in doing that as spiritual beings that have chosen to be spiritually awake, leading to personal self-empowerment, is to be really clear on what you're placing it upon. Because we're no longer placing it upon some deity or some power that has personal qualities outside of us. We're placing it upon the very essence, the one thing of life, God, if you will, that is impersonal by nature, is unfailing by nature, and it exists through us by means of laws of life. It's by choosing to look at life from a multi-dimensional perspective, while at the same time understanding that what you're seeing is oneness. Now, that's a big call, I think. I don't know about you guys, but that's a lot to take in and a lot to do. Yet, that's what we've said yes to. And so today, what I want to remind us of are some very basic foundational components of this teaching so that we can hear it in a new way as we choose to embrace the times that are changing and how we show up in them as the very power itself. And I'm going to look at the 12 spiritual laws of the universe and what they mean. Now, someone declared them the 12 spiritual laws. One could say there's one could say there's 613. We're going to look at 12 today, okay? When you think, and this was written by Catherine Hurst, when you think about the spiritual laws of the universe, your mind may go straight to the law of attraction. However, it turns out that there's a whole network of interconnected spiritual laws that can impact on every aspect of your life. Even better, although these laws can be used to assist in the law of attraction, you don't need to be working on any particular manifestation goal to benefit here. Often discussed with reference to the healing practice of Ho'oponopono. Did I say it right? How do you say it, someone? Louder so everyone can hear you. Do we need a beatbox behind it? No. Okay, so say it louder, please. Ho'oponopono. Say it loud, Lenore. That's it, okay? Which is sorry, I tried practicing it. What we're basically talking about here is having a solid sense or an expanded idea of these spiritual laws so that we may develop a clearer picture of our own place in the world. And when we don't understand the connections between spiritual laws, we encounter obstacles as to how we use the power of life itself. So I'm going to dive into them right now so that we can understand that as we move into an advanced approach to our personal work, in other words, bringing our personalness to the impersonal, we can do it with respect to each law and broaden our mind to understanding what's taking place in the multidimensionality of life as an expression of the one. The first is the law of divine oneness, which is a foundational law of understanding metaphysics and new thought, according to which absolutely everything in our universe is interconnected. Now, I speak about this all the time, but what this goes on to tell us is that, in other words, every choice, word, desire, and belief you have will also have an impact on the world and the people in your life. We often refer to that in this teaching as the ripple effect. That as you express your energy, it moves out and engages every single thing out there. Why? Because we're all interconnected, even though we can't see it, touch it, taste it, or feel it. Which leads us then to the second law, which is the law of vibration, which tells us that every particle in the universe is in constant movement and constantly carries energy. This applies to enormous parts of the universe, like planets and stars. However, it also applies to the chair underneath you. Think about that for a moment. If the law of vibration wasn't in play, your tuchus would be on the ground, right? Goes on to say here, in addition, everything has its own specific energy frequency. Now, we just witnessed that with Cupid. Cupid picked up on something that was going on in the room, probably Snoopy over there. They had a moment, and Cupid growled, right? Now, they're not together. They're not seeing each other. They're not touching each other, but that energetic vibrational frequency changed. And if any of you have four-legged spiritual offspring, you know that how that happens all the time, and even sometimes with your two-legged spiritual offspring, right? So it goes on to say, in addition, everything has its own specific energy frequency. High energy particles are naturally attuned to other high energy particles, and the same is true for those who have low energy particles. Now, for those of you that have studied with me, you know that I absolutely love the work of Dr. David Hawkins. And what his work is all based on this vibrational frequency work, and how it is then regulated and understood and comprehended as the studies of the field of consciousness. He says not only do all of those vibrational frequencies exist, but you can tune them into a state of consciousness, therefore mapping out the levels of consciousness so we can then look at where are we in that evolution of consciousness and where do we want to go. All right, moving us to the next law, which is the law of correspondence. And the law of correspondence is directly related to the foundational law of divine oneness. The key idea here is that patterns repeat throughout the universe, and that prominent patterns can also be found repeating on a very small scale. Now, what Dr. Holmes tells us about the law of correspondence is that the law of correspondence responds to us by corresponding. In other words, we get back to us exactly what we put out. Now, we as human oftentimes want to measure that in the sense that if we give $1.25 somewhere, the basket here, then we're expecting $1.25 to come back to us on Monday morning. It's not how it works. It's not the vibrational frequency of the $1 bill and the quarter. It's the vibrational frequency of the consciousness behind what you put out then returns back to you. Does that make sense? What he says that everything that we put out, which is a vibrational frequency, it's not the tangible good, it's the vibrational frequency. It goes out into the universe, and because we live in a universe that is reciprocal by nature, it returns back to us equal to that, unless, going back to Dr. David Hawkins, with purpose and intention and faith, when we put it out there, we have faith that it returns to us multiplied abundantly. Does that make sense? So our affirmation that we say oftentimes on Sunday mornings is, that which I give, I have faith, returns to me multiplied abundantly. Also in this teaching known as this and more. Moves us then to the law of attraction. The law of attraction tells us that like attracts like. In other words, energy begets energy. So in order to have the things you desire in life, you have to work out how to vibrate on the same frequency as these things. The more general lesson here is that being positive, which I'm not a big fan of that word, proactive and loving attracts more of the same into your life, which then moves us into the next law, which is one when one has really moved into being an awakened spiritual being. It's called the law of attraction. Wait a second. The law of attraction practitioners regularly say that they wish they had known about this law, the law of inspired action. These two laws, when tightly bound together, and the inspired action law tells us that we must actively pursue our goals. In other words, it's not enough to just visualize a goal. As the quote says, it's not enough to just have information without application. That's hallucination. It's telling us that we use that information and then step into the experience of the very thing that we desire to experience prior to having the experience. And by stepping into it through an act of faith, we then draw it into our world and it then becomes real. Does that make sense? So the first step to that is believing that the power that exists for you to manifest and co-create the very thing you desire already exists within you, and your role is to know that, which then moves us to the next law, which is the law of perpetual transmutation of energy. And this states that everything around us is in constant flux. There's another word for that I'm speaking of, change. All right? You can't see all of these changes because many of them exist at the cellular or atomic level, but they carry on regardless. The reason it's so important to be aware of this law is that it helps you see how you can trigger life-affirming change in life, which then moves us to the next law, which is the law of cause and effect. And this tells us that all actions have a corresponding reaction. Now, we all know this, right? And of course, we know that when it comes to the physical aspects of the world, however, we may not have really lined it up with the spiritual aspects of the world. Your spiritual life and your spiritual practice can impact the world around you, causing positive or negative, life-affirming or life-detracting reactions. Similarly, your physical environment can impact your spirituality, whether for good or for ill. Ask yourself, what types of relationships you see between the spiritual and the physical, and how you might want to change them. Has anyone ever moved through life and something showed up, whether it's a bird singing to you, or a coin falls on the ground, as I talked about last week, or the wind chimes start singing when you least expect it? That speaks to what we're talking of here. It's only woo-woo if you choose to call it woo-woo. And who the hell said woo-woo was bad anyway, right? I dated woo-woo once. Pretty good. Anyway. Which moves us on to the next, and I'm just going to highlight these quickly so we can move on. The next is the law of compensation. As I said earlier, you receive what you put out. The next is the law of relativity, which is an understanding that it's all about the neutrality of the neutrality of things when seen in isolation in life. So no particular person, experience, emotion, or action is evaluated as good or bad until you look at it in comparison with something else. In other words, it's understanding that life itself, there's no comparison to what transpires in life, and yet it becomes relative when you add your personal process to it. When you begin to look at life and label it as good or bad or as extreme or as not. You guys get the picture. Which then leads us to the next, which is the law of polarity. The most important thing to remember that absolutely every single thing has an opposite. And that it's the very existence of these opposites that allow us to understand our life. Doesn't mean that we have to live in them, but to understand that they exist. Which then takes us to the next, which is the law of rhythm. And the law of rhythm is focused on movement. And particularly, it refers to the fact that all things in life come in cycles. Now, this is a law that oftentimes in metaphysics we don't want to look at, because we live in this world, this airy-fairy world often, where we've been told that every single thing is good. But that's a misunderstanding of what's being taught here. We're not saying everything is good at the relative level of good versus bad. We're saying everything is good at the metaphysical, the absolute level, meaning that good, uppercase G-O-O-D, which is a synonym for G-O-D, meaning that at the divine level, everything is indeed perfect, whole, complete, and good. However, once it then goes through the filter of creation into the form that we've participated in the co-creation of, and we then assign a relative understanding of it, is when then it begins to look as something other than good. And the point of the law of rhythm is that there are cycles to life itself. Which then leads us to the final one, which is the law of gender, which has nothing to do with biological sex, by the way. It refers to the fact that there are two major types of energy in the universe. You can think of them as masculine and feminine, as yin and yang, or as anima and animus. We all contain a certain amount of both energy and must find a way to achieve a balance between both types if we are to live authentically and happy. Change happens. If you were to ask Ben Franklin, he would tell us that the only thing that is promised in life is change, comma, and death and taxes. But what I want us to focus on is the change, is to today choose to commit to embracing change as it's unfolding, because it is unfolding. And to ask yourself today, are you willing to expand your mind to look at these different laws of life and how they're showing up in your life? They don't show up in life because you choose to look at them. The question is, how are you seeing them and using them as they are showing up in your life? Because the laws that I'm speaking of, as talked about earlier, are impersonal, and yet we have the great opportunity in this very moment to bring our personal to it, and to use them effectively and consciously and purposefully, and in so doing, enact change in a way that not only brings to us peace, power, beauty, joy, light, life, love, and wisdom, but then radiates that back out into the world, and we get to start anew. And so on this day at sundown here in the United States of America, in the Western Hemisphere, Rosh Hashanah begins. And in the Jewish faith, the new year kicks off. And so everyone gets to look anew. And so I invite you, in honor of our beloved Jewish brothers and sisters, both in the room and here in this synagogue, as the sun sets tonight, ask yourself, what are you willing to see anew? Are you willing to commit to a new expression and experience of your divine nature, and using the spiritual laws of life in a way to propagate the very good that you desire to experience, but you can only experience it when you commit to expressing it? And let today be the day. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, gentlemen. Is James going to beatbox from afar now? Is he coming back or no? So while we're waiting on James to come back, I'd like to apologize to those that are watching us on live stream. I know that we don't have James in the frame of this shot today, so when he's at the baby grand, you're missing our baby at the grand. So just enjoy him.
I got this feeling inside my bones. It goes electric, baby, when I turn it on. All through my city, all through my home. Nothing up, no ceiling when I'm in the zone. Since I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet, I'm on lock the way we rock it, so don't stop. Fluttered eyes up off it, moving so phenomenally. Room unlocked the way we rock it, so don't stop. Sit under the lights when everything goes. Nowhere to hide when I'm getting you close. When we move, yeah, you already know. So just imagine. Nothing I can see but you when you dance, dance, dance. Feel a good, good creeping up on you. So just dance, dance, dance. Come on. All those things I shouldn't do when you dance, dance, dance. And there ain't nobody leaving soon, so keep dancing. Can't stop the feeling. Hey. Just dance, dance. Can't stop the feeling. It's something magical. It's in the air, it's in my blood, it's rushing on. Don't need no reason, don't need control. There's love got no ceiling when I'm in my zone. I said I got that sunshine in my pocket, got that good soul in my feet, feel that hot blood in my body when it drops. Ooh. Keep dancing, say, can't stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, can't stop the feeling. So just dance, dance, can't stop the feeling. Just dance, dance, can't stop the feeling. Just dance, dance, can't stop the feeling.
Yes. James Harper. Yeah. Good job.